Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us again at our next guest. You know, the show where we sit down with guests to talk about the reality behind the work. And, you know, it's not just about the polished stories, but it's about how things really unfold and how their careers have shaped. I'm really excited about today's guest because she is someone whose work feels especially relevant right now. Xinlin, welcome to our show. I'll do a very brief introduction because I know that Sandrine knows you a lot better. But just to say, you're an educator, a writer, and a community activator. And I am so excited to hear your story. Sandrine, maybe you want to do a proper introduction on Xinlin?
I guess that's it. Thanks a lot, Donna. I think that Xinlin, you're going to tell us like more about it. But today's conversation explore a different way of relating to the world, to nature, culture, and one another, like the connection to each other. Xinlin, you worked across ecology, education, and cultural exchange from China big cities like Shanghai to more remote Himalayan communities in Chengdu. You're also the co-founder of Living Earth Co-Creative, inspired by the belief that all living beings are deeply connected. Xinlin, can you tell us more about your journey and what led you to this work?
Thank you. It's honor to be on your show, Donna and Sandrine. Um, it was a beautiful introduction. I think it's like simply put my meandering journey of my life so far, and it's still flowing and emerging. I came to this work from a long journey. But I really like how, and your show was saying that this is about the reality of the world, not like very clean, like clean trajectory, like a lot of people would think about it. So I started my university as a educator. I've learned English as a second language and teaching. So my designed role was to be an English teacher. And then I actually did taught English in some schools during my college years, actually. But right after my college graduation, I started to become a journalist. I met two Dutch. One is a journalist and one is an architect, and they're now both live in the Netherlands. And they were working on a research project about emerging mega cities in China. And they came to my city to research, and we met and we started to collaborate. It was such an interesting journey, which I'm not going to unpack everything now, but I think, and that journey kind of redirected my journey from a educator as designed to be a journalist who is asking questions. I guess similar thing, educators in the classroom asking your teachers a lot of questions, and become a journalist, and you're also asking a lot of questions and curious questions. But in that, yeah. If there's anywhere in the topic, and you could stop me and ask further questions.
Yes, I think I'm getting curious because you have worked and tell me and correct me, you've been involved a lot in Himalayan project, working with local communities. I do see also from your painting or pictures, amazing one, that you are also like all about nature and ecology. So tell us more, because we understand that there was a new trajectory, but what made you click and say, okay, I'm going to extend, I'm going to dig in more, you know?
It actually, my journey didn't start there. It kind of, well, I wouldn't say it ends, but it kind of went there from the urban study, from being a journalist in the urban study and working with the architects, working with a lot of artists, working in an urban context. And that was a couple of years I was really like, driven by this promise, the excitements of an urban life. Like dreaming to be in a creative office, and, like working was really cool. People going to art shows and everything, they're still really interesting for me. But there's somehow in those years of processes I've witnessed, I lived in Shanghai back then. I witnessed a lot of resources from international, everywhere coming to China and infused into the urbanization, going to art worlds and everything. But then somehow changed, like economic, um, going down and some conflicts happening and those resources pulled out and there's nothing really left in in the art world. Like a lot of infrastructure were built, but there wasn't enough content. There were not enough talents who can really hold the essence of cultural creativity, and they just went somewhere else. And all this money coming in, like it didn't really leave anything, but it actually flooded a lot of resources and talent out of this community. Let's say Shanghai, well, it is a big community. And then that brought me, I don't have an answer back then. I still don't think I have an answer, but I have a hunch. I think a lot of the challenges and difficulties that we're experiencing in the urban context actually did not start in urban. And there's a deeper roots upstream. So I kind of decided to go to upstream to look for more. I want to dig more. As a journalist, I was digging, asking questions and cross-referencing. So I really want to understand more. So I had an opportunity with back then it was a great research projects about the global countryside. It was an exhibition made for the Guggenheim Museum in New York. It's called The Countryside, the Future, created by Ram Koolhaas and his team. It was a visionary research projects. I joined that project in China, and that project studies Chinese countryside. And that was perfect. It was a click. And then that project brought me to different part of China's countryside and talk to people and talk to local governments to understand what are the trajectories of countryside revitalization. That was kind of a national strategy here for China. What are the changing that experiencing in the countryside, including these natural reserves, preservation areas, and national parks. And so all of that kind of belongs to the beyond the city zone, which is the countryside in the show. So that's kind of what to put me there. First, as a scholar study, like someone just asking questions and research. But then during the show, I kind of encounter a bit of a perception change, paradigm shift, challenge, like a lot of that induced inner quest, I guess. And then after the exhibition, I went to the Ganzi areas in Sichuan, that's a Tibetan autonomous zone. I started working with a community and become an educator in a community, and that's kind of brought me there, like deeply rooted, brought me there. So starting from research, study, writing into more of an embodied experience, working and living there.
That's quite a journey going from this, idea of diving into like urban studies, urban life. There's sort of like an image that you have in your head, like you said, big offices and, and then going to the other side, countryside, exploring and discovering the countryside. What are sort of like your biggest takeaway from that journey? What are some of the perceptions that you had before that you now don't have anymore?
There are a lot of ones, but what came to me while I'm listening is the phrase, the map is not the territory.
Sorry, say that again.
The map is not the territory.
The map is not the territory.
Yeah. What I mean by that is, like being in the city, working in the urban context, and usually we have a clean ideas and we have a plan and then we just move forward and push through the plan to make the plan more or less, come to being. But of course, we know that all plan fail in contact with reality. Like all plan will be somehow being shaped, sorry, being shaped by reframed by the reality, contacting reality. But countryside or anywhere beyond the urban logic, nature, indigenous communities, wild, and those are big classrooms and very ground teacher, and they teach you what things should be done. It's not by your plan, but you have to a little bit of dropping your plan and start to listen to what the land wants, what the place wants, what the people living in this place aspire to, and then think about how you could support that becoming. So instead of me becoming the force making things happen, but in the countryside, I have to learn to work indirectly. I have to learn to work together with the land and with the community. So that's perception shift. My role, a lot of also a bit about being humble was what I learned in the countryside.
Xinlin, I have a question because I'm getting really curious about your journey and to make it maybe more concrete for the audience who've never been yet in China, never experienced like the life you've got. So moving from big cities, buzzing like Shanghai, and then like to more remote, I would say, villages and communities, indigenous communities. Can you take us like through a moment while you've been in those remote villages where you had or you totally shifted like your perception of what is real progress? Because we have, perception in big cities of what is progress all about. And did it shift when you moved like to those remote communities and villages?
Yeah, thank you. First to clarify, during the years of living in the countryside, I was kind of moving between different rural villages because our learning center has a few sites around the Tibetan area. So like I'm kind of jumping behind from 2,600 meter above sea level village into this village, which is 4,300 meters above sea level. So kind of in between, from semi-rural to very rural, even to nomadic, semi-nomadic communities. And during this time, I still, keep a very strong connection with the city. So I still kind of come back to city. And to be honest, I sometimes really want to be living within a lot of people in the urban life and miss it. So it was not like it's not complete left or right, black or white. It's kind of a blended, self-blended grayness of. I guess that's the reality. Yes. So you're asking about a moment while living in the countryside, and I felt reconsider what really is progress. I want to share a moment. It stays with me on art. It was I think 2023. It was during pandemic. I was in the village, and in the early morning, me and my colleague took on a walk into the village, into the mountain, and we witnessed a wildfire starting from the other side of the mountain. So from our side of the mountain, we see the smoke start to rise, starting very faint, very small, like you can barely notice. But being there long enough for like 10, 20 minutes, you could see the fire becomes much bigger. We were a bit stunned. We don't know what to do. It felt like, a wildfire that might kill life that is happening right in front of you, and you see it's getting bigger and bigger, and it is coming your way. And other than making a phone call to our local fire station, we don't know what else to do. And instead we had this like eerie, strange silence, standing forest, looking at the fire, getting more and more serious. And there's a blank in my head. And this whole thing about, climate change and about, protecting our environment and forest, all these informations we learn so much, we watch so much from news, from TV, and, and we kind of click and share and thumb up, and we send it to people, like say, hey, this is great. Well, this is important news. We have to learn about, we have to do something about climate change. But that was a moment when I'm actually face to face confronting the result of a climate change. And it was so, how do I put it? It's both close and far. It's so close. It becomes far away. I thought, oh, like newspaper is close, but this is real close. And then I have not too. I got all this knowledge I have learned about climate change, of the knowledge that we have gathered as in technology, in combating the wildfire, were not being used. It wasn't helpful at that moment. You know what happened in the forest? In the village. So like a half an hour later, obviously that fire becomes much more serious, and the whole village, the whole region start to be activated, and they pull up all the men and women, who, like a local firefighter team, they're the farmers, and they just pulled out of their farmland and like taking the tools, and they gathered in our study center, which is the highest building in the mountain. So they come to the center, they start strategizing what to do with it. And this elder came and say their experiences, what's the reason fire. But the reason fire had been long time ago, like no one had that much experiences with combating. So everybody put their thoughts together and discussing, counseling. That was such an impressive moment to see the elders taking their role in sharing, young becoming very, like bold and very brave. And we, as, kind of someone who come to do a study center, learning center here, we couldn't do much because we're not local and we don't know how to use these tools. And, all that knowledge, which was supposed to be here and teaching, ecological knowledge, but that was a moment we cannot be of anyhow helpful. Well, what we can do is to pour tea. At least that's what we can do. And during the night, and there's no electricity, so we're trying our way together. And the tool they use, like it was so simple. It was the most original, like a broom that it created locally with a certain material that had to make that tool out there in space. I'm thinking like all those technology we had, and can we put a drone or can we do something about it? There wasn't. And in that very moment, the only thing that you can rely on is each other, is the community, is the knowledge that accumulated there. Everyone play a role in that. So I think, like all progress is important. It's great. I'm not in anywhere denying that. But appropriate progress into, in service of a local development, that's where we should be striving to. Yeah.
And thanks a lot, Anne, for the story. From what I'm understanding, it's you've been there like as expert of ecology, and in some ways, like you got overwhelmed by a situation that was like out of like your skill set and your scope. And at the end of the day, what we realize is that, okay, we are all having like expertise or like know-how. And then if we work like all together, this is something that works out. Talking about your work, and thanks a lot for sharing this story. You mentioned while we had a quick chat together about, mass production, farming, and that was extremely insightful, what you said. You talked to me about permaculture, about the different ways that like local Chinese communities approach that. Would you like to tell us more of your findings or what you discovered and what we can learn, we living like maybe in urban cities, from those rural communities?
Thank you. Sandrine, thanks for playing that back to me because while I'm listening to you, I suddenly noticed, and there's another lesson that I've learned from that fire experiences that was really about what ecology is. Because ecology, it's not just, mountains and waters and all those natural things, and it's connection, it's relationship. And then how am I relating to these people? How these are village society as an ecology? Like, there's a diversity in it. We have elders, we have youngers, we have people from inside the community, we have people from outside of the community, all get together. And that diversity is crucial to provide, resilience for that ecology, for that network. So more and more I'm noticing that we cannot have, like a prime, beautiful nature ecology, like nature ecology intact without fixing our, relationship with each other, our human ecology, our inner ecology as well. So all these levels has to come together. So coming to the other questions about China's agriculture, I mean, I'm not an expert in this. It's such a it's basically foundational topic about learning about China. And then if you read news about China today, like, oh, it's such a advantage in its production and nowadays with electric vehicles, or all those scientific and technology advancements, but foundationally, this is an agricultural country. And this is probably largest small farmer household, indigenous countries around the world, which means most of our most of the people, most of our land, arable land, are farmed not by large farm states, but by small families. When I was doing the research about countryside, one of the questions is how many cities do we have in China and how many countryside we have in China. And then I think roughly back then the number was we got 300 cities, but 3 million countryside. And those 3 million, like sometimes a 2-3 family is one village, and then combining with nearby villages. So if you have a very clear, if you're an eagle, you're a bird flying over China, and you will see there's almost no land and that is being wasted, not being tended or cared, or food, producing food or fruits or some sorts. Even this land, and you see the it looks prime and foreign, very original, but a lot of yaks living in their Tibetan villages, living in their semi-nomadic or nomadic, and there's a long generational practice of land caring, land stewardship. And that's what I mean by being indigenous, that people live on that land for generations, and their accumulated knowledge and wisdom and deep connection with that land. And these are still living today. So, coming to China and take a trip, and I think, coming to Shanghai and Beijing, see the Great Wall and see the Bund, they're beautiful, but there's definitely like what the essence of China, and also what propel what Chinese people think, our culture and our philosophy, our DNA, are actually kept in this countryside, kept in the small farms.
I like that. It's so when I was writing my book, I connected with this community. I don't know, maybe you know them. It's called With Life, an online community. You know them? And what I liked about it is that they very much look at business in this case from the point of view that we are all nature. We are all part of nature, and everything is part of nature. And what I love about what you're saying is I can hear that. And I also hear, which is something that I'm actually really sad about, is, the knowledge that indigenous people have that is slowly being lost. I feel that we're losing so much of it. I love how you were saying, with the community, when they were extinguishing the fire or when they were looking at how do we extinguish that they came together and then this knowledge of the community is brought together in order to solve the problem that is at hand. Um, when you navigate this world now, what are some of the things that you've discovered that help you maybe see things from a different perspective, or that you can give to other people as well to say, hey, think about yourself as part of, or what are some of the wisdoms that you have experienced and that you can share?
Well, first of all, being humble, dropping that I know all, I'm the expert kind of mentality on listen to what is really needed and what is being expressed over there. I think that sense and respond um, mentality is crucial. I think it's for all kind of regenerative work. Um, because trusting yourself has, a lot of, well, you are an expert and you don't have to, state it everywhere, but being an expert means that you could respond to requests instead of, presenting something you have already done elsewhere. So that expertness should be grounded into listening, into sensing, and able to communicate and respond. So that's the first. And second is don't rush. Time, trust the time, and things evolve in its own time. And so is working and in the nature, in the countryside, and all living system has its own rhythm, has its adaptive cycles, and understanding what cycle it is in and how are you supporting the cycle to move forward. And perhaps that's more of the role that we are playing, instead of jeopardizing like over hovering with some your plan or someone else's plan. And so trusting the time, but also go with the rhythm. Third thing is with elders. The elders are not just human elders, but also the nature elders, the trees and locals, keystone species, and what are the species that being revered in this region, and how can we learn from that? And elders, I mean, human, people, human-shaped elders in the community, it's so important, so crucial. And sometimes without them, they didn't even have to say much. There's that grounding presence there that brings the community together. So revere and celebrate and listen to and respect the elders of human form and the nature form. I think that's very crucial. And third, the fourth, but perhaps it's the most important thing, I think, like one for all, is trusting life. Trusting life, trusting the people that you're working with as their sovereignty, as their agency to come up with their smart answer, and you're here to work with them, listen to them, draw that wisdom out. But together as human, trusting that the countryside, the village, the land that you're working with, that is also a living system. And that living system also has its innate wisdom, its sovereignty, its agency. And how do we collectively as a human to help that place to draw its wisdom, to express? There's a saying in the Tao Te Ching, I think chapter 60 something, 64. It says the role of human beingness is to help all nature to express its own becoming without assuming yourself. And then that's the role that we're playing. How do we support life in its becoming? And this topic is it felt less relevant for the city, the urban dwellers, but becomes so present, almost most important topic for anyone working with the land and the countryside. So that's where I found my inspirations and then like humbly still learning now. But then my question is, how would an urban dwellers learn from this experience? Because, most of the humanity is now living in the cities and we're in an urbanized world. And there's a lot of decisions about the countryside is made in the city. It's made by people sitting in city office. And, it's never cut to, polarity, and there has to be connected. And perhaps that's what I need to be learning more and getting more of my skills. And I do now live in the city, so I no longer live in the countryside. Yeah, perhaps I'm trying to legitimize my choices. I don't know.
That is so beautiful. I think it's you're absolutely right. Personally, I have a new love and affection for nature. I think that happened during COVID when, we were able to pause a little bit and to look at our own urban chaotic self, and we were longing for something, and that turned out to be the outdoors and nature, and we were like appreciating being outside again, I would say, in a new light. So I completely hear it. But do you find yourself looking for maybe nature or the countryside while being in this urban environment? Do you long for it?
Yes.
Do you actively go there?
It's like a yin yang, like in the yin yang shape, there's a yin in the yang and there's a yang in the yin. And when I'm in the city, well, I'm here in my home and my parents are visiting me. I'm really enjoying this kind of, togetherness, and we take a walk outside and see what new shops and what communities, in our communities are happening. I'm looking over my neighbor on the rooftop. They're starting to build rooftop farms, starting from like little TikTok trying till now it's quite a large scale. I think there's nature everywhere. And that's what I find comfort with. And so not to say there's no nature and no rural in the city, and I think that's not it. But still, I crave for this wilderness from time to time, and I still like take a very regular trip. I take my friends and take sometimes my collaborators to come to this mountain, come to this community to learn from the place, to learn from the local community. Say like when we talk about regeneration and when we talk about sustainability, when we talk about inner growth, inner development, what do we really mean? What do we have to let go of? What is that perhaps a soft point or even discomfort that we hold to resist us to really ground those conceptual ideas into our whole being? And I think going to these places will give some answers. For example, first of all, going to the place is physically challenging. It's not easy. Like this is 4,000 meters. It's not killing, but it takes some time to accustom to the lack of oxygen environment. It's like a threshold. You're going above the cloud, and in there, your brain naturally do not spin that much anymore. You can't think much because you have headaches and all that. So physically, a lot of parts you're experiencing a threshold crossing, and some other areas as well in these places. So I think the place itself has that power to transform. In there, speaking, wording, narrative becomes less important, and the place itself does the job of teaching and transformation. So I think that is something that you cannot do in the city, in the towers, with a cappuccino and talking about sustainability. It's important, but it's not the whole story. I think this is the other side of the story that we need to be more holistic of.
Really interesting, Xinlin. That reminds me of the philosophy that you've been talking about in your work, that all beings are alive in spirit. And that as soon as we get like to mother nature, then we get rooted and anchored and fully like reconnected. And to bridge or to build up on what you said, yes, when we're in urban cities, we're all like with our coffees, life is moving, it's buzzing, it goes fast and everything. But still, we are more and more like conscious and aware that sustainability, ecology is a big, I mean, I would say it's a big thing. It's something that we should also like more focus on. What
Yeah.
is like your perspective or the perspective of China in that field? Like, how do you approach that? And I'm asking you this question because while living in Europe, but also having lived in Asia, I have been like seeing the landscape changing quite a lot over the years. Something that we, cherish, like nature, is totally like changing and getting industrialized. So what is your view on that?
Yeah. So, the love for nature is not like a country or another country, like the love for nature and return to nature, I think draw as our identity out of our uh culture and passport identity, and there's much more to it. And as the earth beings, and as like sisters and daughters of the watersheds, and then all that, I think that's something that we should all come together and adopt that identity, holding our passport identity. I'm Chinese, I speak Chinese, and then I can understand what China is. But sometimes, like, going into that likeness of treating Earth Mother as our Earth Mother, and that group of people I feel more at home with. So having said that, coming back into looking at what is happening over here in China, and then there's a roller coaster of emotions, sometimes, and up and down. And so, like, I was really proud of us having, all this and indigenous small farmers or semi nomadic people are still taking care of the land. And at the same time, every land are facing some sort of challenges of combining into a big farms, or using pesticides, and using, like big company seeds and everything, like, the local culture and being disappearing. So this destruction is very pervasive, is happening, but staying in that sadness and that pain do not move me forward. And I really like what Joanna Macy was speaking to, is the active hope. It's not hopeful, it's not wishful thinking. And being hopeful is, there's destruction, and you still decide to move forward like a warrior as well. So it's kind of the complexity I'm holding. And I'm due aware of a lot of ecological challenges, both in China and around the world. I mean, I can only say much about what I am connected to, and then holding that in mind and do what I can do to educate people, to learn more about it, to connect, and to generate love. Instead of fear messages. I think that's what I can do, holding that identity and then moving forward and connecting with, like-minded people like you, and spreading, the love, the message, the conscious, clear-minded, rational hope, active hope, and this warriorship spirit around the world. I think that's what I can do.
That's magnificent. I really like that. It reminds me of Margaret Mead, right? Never underestimate the power of a small group of dedicated people. And
Yeah.
I am so with you. I mean, there are so many problems and so many challenges around the world. And rather than, just sitting and moaning and being worried, scared, or afraid of it, what can we
Yeah.
do when we are hopeful and just contribute in our own way as best as we can? That's really beautiful, Xinlin.
Oh, thank you. And I really like Margaret Whitley's word in her book. And then I think, if this is a moment in time, I think maybe in non-dual philosophy, non-dual traditions of Eastern philosophies or Buddhism could contribute to how we see these challenges around the world. Like you're seeing terrible things happening. There's a rage, there's fear, and there's, all that. But how do we hold that at the same time, still, being connected and hopeful and moving forward? And that non-dual, the non-dualness, it's something I think innately Chinese people are okay with because our culture, our language, our mentality, and it's very much taught us from very young age like that. But yeah, perhaps that is something that we could communicate with whoever attracted to this way or wanting to find a balance between the distraction and the hope.
Beautiful. Thanks a lot. If there is like one thing like someone listening to you would love to contribute, as you said, like invest themselves like even more in this topic like of nature, sustainability, but somehow feels disconnected or distant from the topic at the same time. What would you recommend this person or those people to do?
My recommendation. Well, probably if we do this interview somewhere else, it will be different because my answer is always emerging. But what come very alive for me now is starting from taking care of ourselves, our own body, to really trusting us as a living system. This is a living system with a lot of microbiomes and a lot of enzymes and, living communities that formed and, like breathing and drinking water and constantly in dialogue with my surroundings and environment and to be, taking care of our own body, noticing, what is happening inside my body, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and all that. That's really the core, really is the core, because we are the living system. We are the living beings of the world. We are the creations of Mother Nature and the 14 billion year universe journey that come to this being that all lives inside me. And in the Eastern philosophy, very much we look into like acupuncture in our body actually mirror the star constellation in the universe. So we look at ourselves in terms of understanding environment. So I don't think anyone who really truly loves nature do not love their own body, do not love their own life and their own dynamics. So starting from here, I think is the easiest, simplest, most efficient, cost efficient entry point. And then start from there, looking at our relationship with our family, these very close people, because close people trigger us the most if they're here to learn with us. And my parents are here with me, staying for a couple of months. Oh, I'm experiencing this like up and down emotional, but understanding where I am, what I come to be as me, and learning from them and healing perhaps the relationship with them. It was a much needed work. So any ecological work start with yourself, with your family, your close one, with your team member, with your local community, and expanding that nested with a nestedness into a community like this. So I have done a lot of that one, but I'm now starting to come back into my own body, taking care of my health, my routine, eating, and reconnecting deeply with my parents and with my loved ones. I think that's my advice now. Well, not really advice. It's like really what I am doing for myself.
Wisdom. It's a really nice pieces of wisdom, and thanks a lot. It feels also like at the same time extremely spiritual and so rich. I see like a lot of essence from what you're saying, and a lot of people will relate to it. So thanks a lot for sharing. Donna, do you have any other question?
No, I mean, I could talk to Xinlin. I could talk to you for hours because nature is, I'm a tree hugger. So I could talk with you for hours, but I think you've explained everything so nicely, and it was such a rich conversation. Thanks for sharing your experience and your ideas. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks a
Donna.
lot, Cindy. Thank you then like to everyone who listened to this podcast. That was our next guest by Donna and Sandrine. And stay tuned for the next guest. Bye. See you.
See
Bye.
you.